what you might see happening a bit more in the future, because today we're talking about trusted financial services. So this is one example in Hong Kong where some people used AI to generate all the application forms for taking a loan from a bank, everything, the IDs of individuals, modify their faces to look like the customers that were impersonating, and they got loans from the banks as well. Now, what that means is that as communications professionals, you then begin to face a different type of challenge. So on one hand, you're getting the benefits, but on the other hand, you begin to have issues because your customers call you and they are complaining about impersonation, they are complaining about fraud and things like that. But on the flip side, we're also seeing the value of the same technology that fraudsters are using to upset the customer experience. This is one technology company that's raised about $11 million. And if you have Shazam on your phone, how many of us are familiar with Shazam? You know, Shazam listens to music for about 3 seconds or thereabouts and tells you the song. Now, what they've built is the same technology, which is called acoustic fingerprinting, that allows you to listen to someone's voice for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then you can tell whether it's a person or not. Now, this technology now is being used in contact centers, because when people call and it's not that customer, within about 2 or 3 seconds, you can tell whether it's a fraudulent individual or not. So let me come back to where we are today in terms of customer experience. So KPMG runs the annual banking survey. We've done that for close to about 17 years now. And when we look at the data in the last few years, we see that customer experience has been somewhat challenged, particularly within the retail segment in Nigeria. So you would see the industry scores for retail below 75 up until last year. Now, good organizations will have scores in the 80s. The fintechs that we surveyed as well got scores in the 80s. But the top-rated bank did not score up to 80. So just sort of telling you where experience is within the industry. Now, if I deep dive a little bit, so we use what we call the 6 pillars of experience at KPMG, and I look at the details of that. If you look to the left, the bottom left of the screen, you would see that the resolution lines or the resolution dots is one of the most inwards that tells you that as an industry collectively, we're challenged in how we deal with issues, how we deal with complaints. We know that customers are also placing more value on experiences with banks. So if we go on to the next slide, this is an illustration of, a loose illustration of what segmentation is like in the industry. And from the data, from the survey, what we find is that at the bottom where you have most of our customers, so maybe about 90% of the banking industry is in the bottom 2 pyramids currently. And for those customers, trust is at the core of the experience with banks. And trust expressed in the form of security, trust expressed in the form of reliability, trust expressed in the form of integrity as well. And you see that play out in terms of complaints. So if you go on to the next slide, you see the number of complaints in the industry. Now, this is a sample of the top 5 out of 6 banks within the industry. So this is not the entire industry. But we've just taken the top 5 banks out of 6. And you look at how complaints have gone up by 2 or almost 3 times just in the last 2 years. Now, when you look at the issues and we do the diagnostics, I'm sure the first word out of our mouths will be what? Technology. But then, granted or given that yes, we have technology issues, we have downtimes. But if you then look at it at the core, a number of things that a lot of us in this room actually have responsibility for. So things like lack of engagement, things like poor communication, things like low personalization, which then results in unmet expectations, and then ultimately you find the breakdown in trust. As communications professionals, we're at the core of managing communications, managing the quality of engagement within our various institutions, alongside our colleagues in CX as well. Now, what do customers look for when there are issues? What do customers look for? What are those pillars of trust? When things go wrong, what do customers look for? Customers are looking for transparency. They're looking for you to come clean on what the issues are. Up until maybe last year, I would say I'd almost never had a bank email an apology to their whole customer base. Maybe that's a signal that something is changing within the market. Sometimes customers just want you to own up and say, you know what, we haven't gotten it right. So customers are looking for transparency. They're looking for authenticity as well. Authenticity in the manner of communication as well. They're looking for credibility. So sometimes who exactly is coming out to engage? Who exactly is coming out to speak to customers? Who exactly is owning up for what is wrong? We've seen in many other markets where there's serious downtime, and then the CEO comes out and is at the forefront of resolution. So those are things that customers are looking for, and they're looking for responsiveness as well. You know, there's a saying that trust is earned in drops or lost in buckets, and that's the story really for many banks. Customers also want you to put them right. I'm not sure we have a widespread culture of compensation, and maybe the Honorable Justice, I would maybe say from his experience. But that's something that sometimes customers also need to have, where we actually quantify the impact of what has gone wrong and make sure that we're putting customers right or putting them where they should be. I'll skip the case study and go on to the next slide. You can go on to the next. As I begin to round off, how do we begin to build trust in our organizations or within the industry? It starts from inside of each organization. It starts from inside of each bank. It starts from the individual, where as individuals, where as colleagues, we begin to demonstrate integrity at the individual level. And then you go up to competence, where we begin to show that we understand what is going on and we're actually able to deal with it. And then as a group, as a collective, we begin to act in the common interest as well. And then ultimately the outcome you see is what you have as the reputation of your different institutions. With colleagues, what else do we need to do? As communications professionals, it's important that we begin to unify around the customer journey. Working with many banks, what I see sometimes is that marketing has an idea of what the customer journey should look like because they're responsible for what the customer sees. And then technology has a totally different view because they feel there's a different way of doing it. And then CX also has a different view. But for the people in the room, I think it's important that as we go away from here, we begin to lead and unify our organizations around a common view of what the customer journey should look like. It's also important that we define clear communications pathways. Sometimes when things go wrong, you find that we don't know how to process different types of issues. I've seen scenarios where there's downtime and the relationship managers don't know. There are times where there's downtime and some senior people in the bank don't know. So it's important that we define and we lead the definition of clear communications pathways within our organizations. Every bank really should have an escalation matrix that caters to the types of issues that we're seeing now at the different levels of thresholds that we have. And of course, importantly, that we're sharing knowledge and resources across teams as well. With our customers, we go on to the next slide, it's important that we continue to invest in literacy. Sometimes the issues that customers say they have is because they don't know. They don't understand the pricing mechanism. They don't understand why certain events have happened within the bank that you are bound to do by regulation. So it's important that we continue to educate our customer bases. It's important that we're sharing information around data privacy practices as well. As we head into a future where Many of us are looking to monetize data. Many of us are looking to establish or form all types of partnerships and relationships. It's important that you're carrying your customers along on that journey. Investing in trust. When you look at some of the big technology companies, you find that they go out of their way, maybe because they are compelled by regulation, to tell you what they're doing with your data. It's also important that we continue to put the customer in control. I've talked about transparency and honesty as well. And then listening to customer feedback and acting accordingly. With our partners, and I would say, as I said at the beginning, our partners are boundless. So, regulators, other financial services players, technology companies, even the merchants we work with. It's important that we're setting clear expectations for those relationships as well, and that on an ongoing basis, we're evaluating them for alignment. Because sometimes some partnerships need to start and they need to end as well. Because customer journeys would evolve, customer journeys would not in all cases be within your control. It's then important that we begin to wear a hat of co-creating with our partners as well. That we're co-creating solutions, we're co-creating experiences with them. We're sharing best